Let's bring in our guest, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who is former FDA commissioner. He's now on the Pfizer board, and he's a CNBC contributor. And Scott, the politics obviously sound pretty tricky. What's the science say?
Well, it looks like what the kids are abusing are the cartridge-based products, things like Juul and Vuse and Enjoy. They like the disposable, cheap products that are flavored. They like the form and factor. They like the high nicotine content of those products, including Juul. So I think it's potentially sound to ban those products or try to restrict access to those products and carve out the vape stores. That's something that we were looking to do when I was at the FDA, because the adult vape stores, by and large, serve an adult population. But I think at this point, you really need to look at potentially pulling all of those cartridge-based products off the market, because I'm not sure they have enough redeeming public health value, given all the youth use.
You're not even just talking about flavored. You're saying anything out there?
All of them. I mean, you can't, Juul in particular, you can't treat differently, similarly situated products differently under regulation. But Juul at this point is a differently situated product. We now have data from the federal government in the 2019 National Youth Tobacco Survey showing that more than 50% of all kids who vape are using Juul. It's very clear at this point that Juul can't keep their product out of the hands of kids. And you could treat that product differently and selectively pull that off the market, or selectively pull all the cartridge-based products off the market if you wanted to carve out the vape stores, which by and large are selling these open-tank vaping systems mostly to adults. The kids don't prefer those products. And if you look at what's happening in the UK has very high rates of vaping among adults. They don't have the same youth problem that we have. And the difference in the UK is that the nicotine content is lower, and also the predominant product on the market are the open-tank vaping systems. The kids don't like those big contraptions.
You heard what Meg just laid out. Where do you think the administration is heading in terms of what they'll do?
Well, it's hard to read the tea leaves, but if you look at some of the statements that they've made, it seems to be that they're skating towards some kind of carve-out for the adult vape stores. And there's different ways that you can do that. We were trying to approach it by putting in place heightened age verification requirements that we knew only the adult vape stores would be able to comply with. The convenience stores wouldn't be able to comply with that.
Like what?
Well, you'd have to physically restrict access. You'd have to have like a separate room where you card someone before they go in. So only a store that's adult only would be able to restrict access in that way. That was before we had the 2019 National Youth Tobacco Survey data, which showed another big uptick. So what we were saying was if that data showed another big increase, we would probably look to pull all of the cartridge-based products off the market. The other thing you could do is you could say that if you're mixing liquids in response to an individual customer, like the adult vape stores do, that's permissible. But if you're pre-filling syringes for the cartridge-based products, that you can't do. So you can't pre-fill flavored products in syringes for future sale, but you can do it for an individual customer. That would also carve out the vape stores.
So, Scott, last week, the White House Domestic Policy Advisor Joe Grogan made some comments saying that FDA shouldn't be regulating tobacco at all. And you responded pretty quickly on Twitter to those comments. But you had a pretty aggressive stance as FDA commissioner on tobacco. You wanted to lower the level of nicotine in combustible cigarettes. What do you make of the fact that it sounds like the administration wants to back off of tobacco altogether? And do you see them actually stepping back on what you laid out on combustible cigarettes?
Well, I'm not sure those comments represent administration policy, and he was careful to say he's speaking for himself, and I know Joe quite well. Look, this was an important part of what I did at FDA, and I think that there was no more single impactful thing that we could do over any reasonable period of time than try to dramatically lower smoking rates in this country, which have declined more sharply over the last 2 years if you look what's happened to smoking rates. It's true we wanted to regulate nicotine in the combustible products to more rapidly migrate adult smokers off of traditional cigarettes to render them minimally and non-addictive. I would hope that policy continues to go forward.
So if you think that potentially Juul should just come off the market altogether, and they've already removed the mint flavor last week, which comprised 70% of their remaining sales, this is sort of an existential point for the entire e-cigarette industry, right, in this country. Does this industry survive? Can they get back on the market if they're pulled off?
Well, look, the youth problem, the e-cigarettes have redeeming public health value. I think they can help currently addicted adult smokers transition off of combustible tobacco, and they are less harmful than smoking regular cigarettes. And so I still believe in the notion of harm reduction and helping adult smokers quit combustible tobacco, and e-cigarettes offer an opportunity. Juul really is single-handedly almost destroying this opportunity, because what's putting this at risk is the youth use, and what's driving the youth use is primarily Juul.
Are they still marketing to teens?
It doesn't appear that way. I mean, if you look at some of the historical marketing, I think it was definitely targeted towards a younger set. They seem to have cleaned up what they're doing from a marketing standpoint, but, it's hard to unring that bell because you've now hooked a lot of kids on this product, and kids also now it's become sort of fashionable, and they like the form and factor of this product. It could be that this product just can't exist on the market anymore.
Net, it doesn't, People get off, people get on. Net seems like more people are getting on than getting off. For me, that's a hard sell.
Onto nicotine?
Getting onto these things instead of helping people get off.
That's probably
like it's not worth it.
It's probably true right now when you look at the overall data, but you do see smoking rates accelerating their decline and youth smoking rates.
You don't need a whole new generation walking around with steam coming out.
That's the problem. The problem is all the youth use. If we didn't have that, this potentially could be a viable segment, but it's really the youth use that's driving this out of the market.
Is there any data, I've looked for it and haven't found it, of what percentage of Juul sales are to children?
So I was asked that question before Congress, and what I said was that we had data when I was at FDA that between 10 and 20%, but we didn't think that data was reliable enough to publish. But I did say that publicly because I was asked directly by a member of Congress that question. So we never had definitive data on what percentage of Juul's overall sales. At one point, we thought it was between 10 and 20%, and I used that figure. But the new data that came out shows that more than 50% of all kids who are using e-cigarettes are using Juul. So we built into the 2019 survey a question, what brand are you using? And we put the different brands to the kids, and more than 50% are using Juul. So you could back into how much of Juul's sales are to kids from that figure.